Hey guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. Today we are diving into part 2 of chapter 32 in the book of Jubilees. So let's get started.
All right, guys, let's pick it up in verse 16. It says, "On the following night, on the 22nd day of this month, Jacob resolved to build that place and to surround the court with a wall and to sanctify it and make it holy forever for himself and for his children after him. And Yahuwah appeared to him by night and blessed him and said unto him, Thy name shall not be called Jacob, but Israel shall they name thy name. And he said unto him again, I am Yahuwah who created the heaven and the earth, and I shall increase thee and multiply thee exceedingly, and kings will come forth from thee, and they will judge everywhere, wherever the foot of the sons of men hath trodden. And I shall give to thy seed all the earth which is under heaven, and they will judge all the nations according to their desires, and after they will get possession of the whole earth and inherit it forever. And he finished speaking with him, and he went up from him. And Jacob looked till he had ascended into heaven, and he saw in a vision of the night, and behold, an angel descended from heaven with 7 tablets in his hands. And he gave them to Jacob, and he read them, and knew all that was written therein, which would befall him and his sons throughout all the ages. And he showed him all that was written on the tablets, and said unto him, Do not build this place, and do not make it an eternal sanctuary, and do not dwell there, for this is not the place. Go to the house of Abraham thy father, and dwell with Isaac thy father until the day of the death of thy father. For in Egypt thou wilt die in peace, and in this land thou wilt be buried with honor in the sepulchre of thy fathers with Abraham and Isaac. Fear not, for as thou hast seen and read it, thus will it all be. And do thou write down everything as thou hast seen and read. And Jacob said, Yahuwah, how can I remember all that I have read and seen? And he said unto him, I will bring all things to thy remembrance. And he went up from him, and he awoke with his sleep, and he remembered everything which he had read and seen, and he wrote down all the words which he had read and seen.
Okay. Had quite a bit in there.
Yeah, man.
So up here in 18, we've got, if you remember, we had this idea where everywhere he walked would be his inheritance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now it says, wherever the foot of the sons of men hath trodden is where all these kings will judge. Kings will come forth from thee, and they will judge everywhere, wherever the foot of the sons of men have trodden. So essentially, they have jurisdiction over everywhere that man has been at this point. I think that's a neat little thing to bring in there.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is speaking, especially so prophetically, like when we have the New Jerusalem, whenever all the lands are going to be inhabited and ruled and reigned over with, Yeshua and the kingdom coming down.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, like there truly is going to be one Israel. There truly is going to be one high priest, and then all of the people that are a part of his priesthood and a part of that leadership are going to be in charge of the world, in charge of everywhere where people are at. Right now we're not in the fullness of that. We have the promise and the expectation of it, but this is, really, again, like we talked about a few videos ago, as we're looking through these men's lives, they're getting told stuff that's hundreds, thousands of years later, and they have to act on it today in their real life and say, I'm not going to know what's going to happen 1,000 years from now, but what I do today will affect that ultimately, and then it'll be the main difference of how the rest of the world moves and works. It's a really cool to see they're having such a future minded perspective in a scenario where they're still nomads and traveling with tents. They don't even have establishment yet, and they're already like, oh yeah, you're going to rule everything, and you guys are going to be the best and the most awesome. And they're looking around like, well, I trust you, but I don't see it yet.
Yeah. So, hey, guys, I think what's kind of neat here is when we look at this, so it's the 22nd day, right? So when we look on the priestly calendar, this is the 8th great day of Sukkot that the fathers, Jacob's having another vision here.
Mm-hmm.
And what a powerful vision this is, what we just read. I think it's incredible. This is very specific. This wasn't like I think, or kind of saw some things. God's like, no. By the way, this is the way it's going to be. But I think it's really cool that we see God's timing. It seems like when we go back and the more that we learn about the priestly calendar, how the Father is consistently speaking on appointed days.
Right.
And I know right now in our walk, we're doing the best that we can and getting to that place where we're on that same calendar, the right days with the Father. And I feel like we're getting a lot closer. I feel like the last 3 years, especially for us studying out the priestly calendar and our understanding, and then reading Jubilees, and you're seeing through the pages of Jubilees that, again, a lot of things that the Father did was not just a random, hey, I'm gonna do this on Taco Tuesday, whatever. It's like, no, God's like, no, these are my specific days that have been ordained since the beginning, that are written on the tablets in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the days, so that when we go back, you're going to see a pattern of the Father moving on these days. And so that's why my heart's desire, I know is you guys' heart's desire also, and probably everyone watching, that we get to that point that we can be hopefully dead on at some point with the Father's feast days and understanding this and how important that is to be aligned with Him.
And 22 is interesting to me. Let me pull this up real quick. I found the wording in this a little interesting too. So it says, and he showed him all that was written in the tablets and said to him, do not build this place and do not make it an eternal sanctuary and do not dwell here, for this is not the place. Over on the left, the person who put this book together says, their notes is, the sanctuary at Bethel was not to be the one central shrine where alone acceptable worship was to be offered. As with the second temple, it would not house Yahuwah's presence. So I just find that interesting that the word eternal sanctuary was used there.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that, guys? I mean, I know we could just say, oh, they're referencing a more permanent structure, right? Like, don't build a building here. Don't build a permanent structure. But I don't know. The word eternal here just seems odd that was the word that they chose there.
Well, I think a big part of that is, once this place was called House of God, Bethel, I think it probably always was something important, always maybe a place of importance or necessity. But as we look, and it talks about Yeshua going into heaven and being the high priest, he says, I'm going to be a high priest within a temple not made by human hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the fact that Jacob would have had to build it, and then that would have had the established name of House of God. Like Jerusalem is Jerusalem. We know that's going to is going to play its role throughout history, but something is a little bit different about, well, this is God's house, and if it is where God's house is, that ladder was spiritual. There wasn't a literal ladder that Jacob could have climbed up. His house at the time is still in heaven. It's spiritual when it comes to the earth standpoint. So it may have been his footstool or something along those lines. But I think what's interesting is it's, hey, don't put your stuff here. This is my place. So yeah, you can set up a stone, you can set up an altar because that's to me. But if you start building a building, just like the disciples, they're walking around like, oh, look at these rocks and these buildings and these arches. You start to serve and wonder at the building and not the creator or not the spirit that's in that building. So he's like, leave this pure and undefiled. Let this be a place where I come to talk to you, you come talk to me, but that's it. This isn't going to be a place of worship where you bring your cattle and your coins, because he's like, Jerusalem's going to be defiled, but I'm also going to squish it. Bethel's not going to be defiled. I'm not going to squish it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're in Jerusalem, leave. If you're one of those people, head to the mountains. Better hope it's not a Sabbath or you're pregnant, because it's going to be a problem. We never get anything like that with Bethel. He's like, no, leave that separate. So I did just kind of wonder, because of that temple perspective of, it seems like there's so much prophecy here with things looking forward, not really things at current. And Jacob's just in the moment. He's like, okay, well, don't build it. I don't know what that means. But God's like, no, I'm looking 3,000-4,000 years down the road. You don't understand the full story yet.
Right. That's where I was going to go with that, Jonathan, was the fact that this isn't the right timing. When we get to Moshe, when they've lived in Egypt, because Jacob gets called out of that land, and he comes and lives with Joseph in Egypt, right? For however many years he gets to live with Joseph, the remainder of his years. And we see that God set up his people to live in the best part of that land too, in Goshen. The best drinking water, the best fields for all the animals. They really get a nice piece of property while they're there. So I believe that God was like, hey, we're not doing this quite yet. And so when we get to Moshe, when he's given the instructions for the tabernacle, he actually gets to see the real deal.
Right.
He gets to see what is in the heavenlies, and God's like, now recreate this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think this is it's kind of like time out. It's like, you're going to be a great nation. I'm going to do all these great things through you. And man, I see your heart, and I know you want to build something here as a permanent sanctuary and all this stuff. It's just not time yet. That's my personal opinion. It's just not time. I've got something I'm going to do. I'm going to actually build you into a great nation first. Because when they come out of Egypt, I think we all can agree there was at least 1.5 million or somewhere. There's a large number that came out. So God's like, now I have a people group, a nation of people that I'm going to take, re-educate the majority of you on the way and test you. So, when they come into the land, it was for the purpose of that was to be the light unto the nations. So I think that, again, Jonathan, I think it goes back to that, just not God's timing. He's just like, hey, don't build this thing. It's not time yet. I appreciate the hardness, but I need to do something with you, and I need to do something with the people before we get to that part.
Okay, so 3 things.
You want to get to?
Well, maybe I just didn't ask my question correctly. I don't know, but
That's a good possibility.
It's a good possibility. I don't know, because I don't think you really addressed what I was trying to ask here. So the quote that's being said here, it says, "Do not build this place, and do not make it an eternal sanctuary." So the word eternal there, I use the term, permanent, and then, we kind of ran with that idea a little bit, but I don't know that that's what that's saying. I don't know that this is just I don't know that this is referencing a permanent structure, because it says, "Do not build this place, and do not make it an eternal sanctuary." It's as if there's something about it that would make it an eternal sanctuary that he's telling him not to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. I don't know how that would even be possible, because the only eternal sanctuary that I'm aware of is, the one in the heavenlies that's coming down. So I guess that's kind of where I was going at with that. If y'all don't have anything on that, I mean, I'm kind of lost on that myself. So if y'all don't have anything, I mean, that's cool. But you guys in the comments, if you got any thoughts on that, please let us know. And I did want to address one more thing, and that was, he talked about Jerusalem getting squished, but that area wasn't. Well, when the New Jerusalem comes down, it's big enough. That area is getting squished too.
Right. Well, I mean, like the specificity of it. It was like the Jerusalem that is existent today. That will, Bethel is just like it's just a part of the story. It's going to be the land, the surrounding lands that'll be affected as well. But it was like a specific warning for Jerusalem.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm wondering, Kyle, is when I'm going back and rereading through 21 and 22, because this is something the angel is revealing to him. In 21, it says, "And I saw in a vision of the night, and behold, an angel descended from heaven with 7 tablets in his hands, and he gave them to Jacob, and he read them, and he knew all that was written therein, which would befall him and his sons throughout all the ages." So, if he's seen what's going to befall his sons throughout him and his sons throughout all the ages, I wonder if it's written in here about the tabernacle. And how that point, because it said tablets. So I don't know how big these tablets are. What's all that's written on there, but apparently they're for Jacob. Something supernatural in a way to me is happening here, because he's able. Because if he already knew how to read it, why would it say he understood? So I'm wondering.
He definitely got a download.
Right, he's getting a download. So it says, he knew all that was written therein, which would befall him and his sons throughout all the ages. And it says, and he showed him, in verse 22, it says, and he showed him all that was written on the tablets, and said unto him, do not build this place. I've just showed you exactly what's going to happen down the road. So if he's seen all these things and reading about it, he's got to be reading about the tabernacle. So if he's reading about the tabernacle and all the things that are going to take place and where the presence of God is going to be at with his descendants, he says, "Do not build this place, though." I know you're reading it, so I'm maybe it's one of those things where I talk about where God doesn't give us the whole story, because if He give me the whole story, I'm going to want to go do it in my timing. So so someone's like the angel's like, "Hey, you're getting access most people don't get." So you're going to see what's already written down about you, your sons, and all the generations. But that place you're reading about, don't build it. Go ahead, Kyle.
I think you're on to something. That makes a lot of sense. It's like, again, we don't get the entire story, right? I mean, and we're not hearing Jacob's thoughts. We don't know his heart in this moment. You know, for all we know, Jacob could be in a mental place where he's like, okay, there's a lot of bad that's going to happen. Why don't we just bypass all this and just build this final temple, this final sanctuary? Why don't we just do that where, you know, our high priest can go ahead and reign now, and we just bypass all, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and
let's
get to the good part. You know what I mean?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, something else I was looking at in here, you know, as we read through it the first time, and I've had this thought come up a few times, and I've heard it in a few different places, you know, throughout the YouTubery of my life, and you know, it's talking about the Torah, and of course, the word Torah doesn't mean 5 books; it just means instructions. But the label of Torah, how that would be more probably correct to say it's 7 books instead of 5, and that would be, you know, the 5 that we know of plus Enoch and Jubilees. And so I was just kind of thinking, you know, hey, they're showing them 7 tablets. Maybe these are the 7 original books, because that's going to describe the tabernacle. That's going to describe them going in and out of Egypt. That's going to describe going up to Mount Sinai. That's going to describe, like, literally the book of Jubilees being written that Jacob's currently living. You know, it's going to, hey, and then your down the line descendant is going to be at the top of the mountain and write down all the stuff that I'm telling you right now. And he's like, oh, this is a full circle situation. And so then he would really see and understand way more than even Moses would, because Moses isn't, you know, writing this book until the very, very end of his life. And he's never, who knows if he's even heard of a Jubilees, if it existed before that moment when he wrote it, because that's when it first was established. So it would be really interesting if it was like that thought that's been, you know, I said it's in smaller circles right now, but you know, that the original books of instruction from that perspective was 7, and the necessary information was with Enoch and Jubilees attached to Genesis, Deuteronomy, Exodus, you know, Deuteronomy and Numbers, how those, Leviticus, I missed that one, and how those would all line up together as one big story. And Jacob being able to have all that information at his stage in life and his stage of the history of Bible, yeah, that would be a ton of information. You don't even need Revelation and the prophets yet. You just those 7 alone is huge.
I mean, I can see where people would draw that. I don't necessarily agree with that, as far as that being the 7 books, that, you know, these 7 tablets representing that, because there's so many other things that I think would also fall into that category, as far as being that Torah, that instruction, that would be available. But I mean, you got to take it into account. I mean, this is, and he knew all that was written therein, which would befall him and his sons throughout all the ages. So if that information was on these tablets, you're not going to get all of that information from those 7 books. You're going to get some of it, but you're not going to get all of that. I mean, you've got to have the Testament of the 12 patriarchs. You've got to have Revelation. You got to have all that.
But remember, we talked about, you know, like the end being spoken from the beginning. So really, in reality, we do have the fullness of history, like in Genesis. You know, the snake will bruise his head, and then he was, you know, bruise his heel type of deal, crush his head, bruise his heel. So there is a lot of information in the first 5, 7 books, however you want to look at it, that does speak of the New Jerusalem, speaks of the kingdom to come, speaks of a Messiah, salvation, speaks of, you know, the end of our end of the human experience. So that's what I was saying. It's still speculative. I'm not by any means saying this is the answer. It's just that idea being thrown out of there's enough in the early part of the Old Testament that's speaking to the end times that you would know the end. He's like, no, you're not going to know Jonathan and Kyle, that's not going to be written down on these 7 tablets, but you're going to know there's going to
Hey,
be
you
a
never
time.
know. Anchor of Truth might be in there somewhere. It's like,
One of these 7 tablets is, yeah. But, you know, when you look at it from that perspective, you do know the fullness of the story. You just don't know all the details that, you know, are the in between parts. So you know there is a Messiah. You don't know his name is Jesus. You know, or Yeshua. You know there's going to be a New Jerusalem. You just don't know when, where, and how. You know, so I think it still could work. But yeah, it like you're right, Kyle. There's way more information, and of course, I think that's why it's available to them, because these are the supplemental things that happen along the way.
And I mean, heck, at the end of the day, we're talking about something that's miraculous that's happening
Exactly.
here, right?
Yeah.
Like we're talking about something he literally got a download of all of this information and was able to bring it to mind when he started writing things himself down, you know, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So, I mean, each one of these tablets could house, you know, 200 terabytes worth of information. Who knows? You know what
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah,
saying? So, I mean,
right. Well,
who knows how much was there?
for sure.
and I believe it when it says throughout all the ages, I think it's all the way to the age of the return of the kingdom. I think he's
Mhm.
getting the. Now, what's incredible though, and well, let me make this statement first. So, the fact that he knows, and we do know this from our canon, that he does die in Egypt. So he is told. That's why when I was reading this, I was like, he's seeing the tabernacle. He's probably seeing Solomon's temple. He's getting everything. This is the full shot right here, right? So he's seeing all these things. So he's saying, look, this isn't the time for this. So what you're seeing, don't try to build this. This is not where I'm going to place my name. Okay.
Right.
Because in 23 says right there, he says, for in Egypt thou will die in peace. And that's exactly what happened.
Mhm.
He dies at a good old age at 120 years old, or not 120. I'm sorry. How old was Jacob when he passed away? That just escaped my brain. Anyway, he dies at a good old age. And so what we're reading here, he already knows, hey, this is the place that I will be buried with my fathers. And
Mhm.
exactly what Joseph did. Joseph said, hey, Pharaoh, I need to take my dad's remains and I need to go bury him with my forefathers. And Pharaoh's like, hey, whatever you need. Matter of fact, I'm gonna send an army with you to make sure everything's, I'm gonna give you the what do you call that when during the funeral when the police they escort you. So I'm gonna give you a personal escort of the soldiers all the way there. And I think some of that Pharaoh's like, make sure you coming back. Make sure you come back now. But anyway, so I think that's that, pulling it all together like that. I agree with you, Jonathan. It could be, I think it could be the Torah plus everything else
Mhm.
that he's given. I think now here's the other crazy part. It says right here in 25, and Jacob said, Yahuwah, how can I remember all that I have read and seen? And he said unto him, I will bring all things to thy remembrance. And in 26, and he says, and he went up from him, and he awoke from his sleep, and he remembered everything which he had read and seen, and he wrote down all the words which he had read and seen. Like, to me personally, like, where is this?
Mhm.
Was this something that hopefully got passed along through the generations? Is this something yet to be revealed? I don't know. I mean, that would be really cool to have whatever he saw in this vision, like to have. But again, that would probably be dangerous for us. I don't know why God told him to write it down unless it's to be revealed at another time.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, why would you write it down unless there's something important about this that you had to write down? And so maybe revealing later down, maybe we're in that age now where something like this may come up. We never know. One of the greatest archaeological finds ever, and it's a complete copy of what he saw.
Well, and I think maybe again speculation, but we see like Ezekiel and Zechariah and John and different people who see stuff,
Mhm.
and then with the stuff that they see, they write down, and they do their best to describe, a wheel within a wheel, and the 7 lampstands before the Father with 7 flames, and the streets of gold or whatever. They might not be literal gold, they might be shiny something, but they're doing their best to write down what they see. And so I think it's funny or interesting in this category because he says he wrote down everything he read and saw. So he
Mhm.
was apparently given reading material, like books or papers or
Something.
tablets, something that he could tangibly like eyeball read. But then you're kind of just copy pasting from that point. I read it, I write it down. But then he wrote down everything he saw as well. I think this is maybe one of the first times that we see somebody have a read and write or read and see and then to
Mhm.
write all that down. Like Enoch was in the heaven and he wrote down everything he saw. And then so and so wrote down everything they read. But here you're just like everything you read and you saw. So yeah, Joe, to your point earlier, this is a very special event, very unique in that manner, because reading something is, almost with exaction. Build it with this many cubes and this many things and this many, you kind of need to read that. But to see, you're like, I got to see everything. Like with Moses, he went to the top of the mountain and got to see. We don't know what that is. He never wrote that down. There's a lot of times where somebody was like, oh, I was in the spirit and I saw. Well, what'd you see? Stuff. Can't really tell you, where here it's like, I wrote down everything.
If I tell you I have to kill you.
Yeah.
Hey, in the spiritual realm, it might be true.
Yeah, no, right.
Might be. I do want to back up real quick, but then I want to touch on this tablet thing again. So let me pull up 23 again. This part where it says, "For in Egypt thou wilt die in peace, buried with honor in the sepulchre of thy fathers." So I do think that it's interesting. So he's being told where he's going to die and that he will die in peace. I find that very interesting, and with honor, that sort of stuff. So he's there's some assurance there. It's his fate is being told to him, but it's being told to him in a way that there's no fear.
Yeah.
Right? He's removing that aspect of fear. I mean, think about it. Like if all you're told is, you're going to die in Egypt, you're going to do everything you possibly can to avoid going to Egypt. You know what I mean?
Not to mention that wasn't their friends at the time. That might have been hostile. You know what I mean? So they're like, oh, you're going to go to a hostile land and die in peace. What? Well, thank you for the warning. But if it's going to be in peace, okay. All right, I'll give it a chance.
So very cool there. A lot of trust and obedience and that sort of thing on his part there. So I just thought that was really cool. And I also wanted to come back to the tablets. And I think I just made a very simple connection here. And that is we have 7 tablets. And it's what's going to befall him and his sons throughout all the ages. I think that those 7 tablets, each tablet represents a millennia.
Good call.
There
I
you
like
go.
that.
Yeah, Jonathan the Torah.
So easy.
I'm kidding.
Hey,
I think that's pretty cool. Here's the thing too with that, real quick, about him dying in peace. Why would that need to be said? What is happening in Jacob's life that he has no peace?
Esau.
Have you read this?
Laban, Esau.
Right?
No.
Surrounding nations.
What is happening at the time that he says you're going to die in peace? Because he gets reunited with Joseph. See, at this point, you could tell Joseph being gone has messed him up from the whole time Joseph's gone. Matter of fact, when it comes to little brother Benjamin, he didn't want to let him go. He's like, am I to lose another son? And it basically said it's going to kill me if he leaves and he dies or he's taken. I'm done.
That's good, dude.
So I think he's letting him know, by the way, you saw everything that's taking place,
and there's famine in the land.
Yes.
So all this stuff going on.
There's all kinds of stuff. But by the way, at your passing, it's all going to be good. You're going to have a big family reunion. Your son Joseph going to be reunited. You're going to live in a great piece of property here in Goshen. It's going to be, your last days are going to be good. So I think that's important. I think that's why that's put in there about how you will be buried. It says you will die in peace, and also and don't worry, you will be buried with your fathers.
I find that kind of interesting because it said he was told all that would befall him and his sons, yet for generations to come. Yet when they're in this situation, he doesn't trust that his son is alive throughout all this. 2, he's not trusting that that something can't happen to his other children. If he was shown these things, shouldn't he know? Shouldn't he kind of know Joseph's set up? Did he forget? Did his faith lack? What happened here?
Well, maybe, and again, we don't know the level of detail that was given to him.
Right.
I mean, it may not be down to the specifics of, by the way, your son Joseph is going to be taken, and these things are going to befall him, and you're going to feel, like you want to die every day because your son's gone. So I think that's probably one. I don't think everything is very specific down to the everyday.
Right.
I think, hey, by the way, this from here on, this is how it's going to progress all the way to the end of the ages.
Right.
So I mean, so anyway. That's my opinion. I don't think he's given the exact part of that.
That makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I was going earlier too. Is like it seems as though, and again, all this is speculation. We're just trying to dig into the best we can.
Right.
But it seems as though it would be very high level, high altitude view of what's going on. Of, hey, you are going to be something special. Your descendants are going to be something special. The Messiah is going to come from your lineage. The Messiah will defeat death in the grave. Ultimately, you guys will all end up being priests and kings in the New Jerusalem. Your sons will be the 12 gates, and then later there's going to be these apostle guys, and they're going to be the 12 pillars, and this whole story is going to be something really cool and amazing. So that's you getting told the whole story without going into any detail. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's all the important facts. Like we look at our core tenets of Christianity as the religion it is. It's death, burial, resurrection. There's only one God. This, and that. So you can get the whole story in 5 sentences, but the details are ultimately important as you walk it out and live it out. So Jacob knew in advance there's going to be hard times, but I'm going to die in peace. So he's like, in the moment, I don't know, is this the peace that I was supposed to be waiting on? Because this doesn't make any sense. So you could still see him struggle through the day to day, because that would, I think, God giving us too much information, like Joe was saying earlier, where we don't get the whole story, is we almost, in a very interesting way, would lose some of our free will, because we would already know the story. So then when that choice came up, we wouldn't really have a choice. We would just be like, oh yeah, that one. Oh, duh. I mean, well, it says when you get to the tree, turn left. So, are you really saying I'm choosing life or choose death today? Or am I just choosing what God already told me to do? You're essentially predestined at that moment. You would still have that choice that would be made, but you would know what you were going to do because the story was already told to you. So you're pretty much just on rails. You're just walking out what's already been told to you, versus you really truly making a hard decision each and every moment. You're just like, well, I already know I'm supposed to be in Egypt. So whenever it says go to Egypt or go to Samaria, I'm going to go to Egypt. So I don't have a choice. Then you kind of lose a little bit of the heart behind those decisions. I think that's why we don't get day to day type of interaction like that, where we still have to pray to God each moment. Hey, what should I do today? Give me the words to say. We're still actively pursuing that relationship because we don't know the next moment. We might know, hey, when I die, I'm going to be with Jesus. We know that, but what's going to happen tomorrow? I don't know. I just know whenever I do get around to dying, where I'm going to end up.
Yeah. Think about this too. So when we go back to the story of Joseph, when Joseph shares his dream at about age 17 or however old he was a young guy, he shares his dream, the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything bow down to him.
Yeah.
And his father kind of rebukes him a little bit and goes, "Hey, is me and your mom supposed to bow down and worship you?" But then it says something interesting, and Jacob went back and pondered what his son had said. So it makes me wonder if Jacob all of a sudden going, you know what? I didn't quite see this in what I saw and wrote down, but I wonder if this is part of that story. So when it's almost like all of a sudden it comes back to Jacob's memory of oh yeah, all those things I wrote down, the visions I saw. Is this part of that?
Yeah. How does this play in? How does
Right.
this work?
That's why I think he went back and he pondered it. He pondered what Joseph had said.
Right.
Because he's trying to figure out, is this part of the plan? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But then he gets rocked because next thing you know, he sends out his son to go, Joseph to go look after his other brothers. Then they come out and report that he's dead. Is this your son's jacket? It's all with the fake, well, not fake blood, but the blood of a goat on it. Apparently a wild animal must have killed him. So then all of a sudden it's like, well, I was pondering the words that he was saying and kind of making it kind of as a fit for what I know. Now he's dead. Like this isn't making any sense at all now. Like this is part of the plan, So there's a lot that we don't know. And again, we're just speculating, but it did bring me back to that point, that story where he did ponder what his son said, and I think it may go back to this very story right here of him thinking about, is this how this is supposed to play out?
Well, and what it does is it ultimately builds that trust. It's like, regardless of the detail, regardless of what your eyeballs are seeing, regardless of what's right smack dab in front of you, know what I already told you. Kind of like, Joe, you read earlier in that in your sermon this last week about the kings, about the good prophet and the other prophet, and you're like, hey, I told you what I told you. So if anybody comes and tells you otherwise, it's not the answer. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Doesn't matter how you feel. We already gave you the answer. So keep walking out those original instructions. And like you said, for Jacob, he's like, so I saw something, and it has something to do with Joseph, but he's dead. But I know what I saw, and I know that my sons, all 12, are going to be a part of the story.
Yeah.
something's up. So I'm gonna hold out for hope. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm gonna be sad, but I'm gonna have this inkling that, like I said, I took that dream and I'm gonna hide that away because there's something here.
Mhm.
Yeah, good point.
Very good.
All right, guys, let's pick it up in 27. And he celebrated there yet another day, and he sacrificed thereon according to all that he sacrificed on the former days, and called its name Addition, for this day was added. In the former days he called the feast. And thus it was manifested that it should be, and it is written on the heavenly tables. Wherefore it was revealed to him that he should celebrate it and add it to the 7 days of the feast. And its name was called Addition, because that is what was recorded amongst the days of the feast days, according to the number of the days of the year. And in the night on the 23rd of this month, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and they buried her beneath the city under the oak of the river. And he called the name of this place the river of Deborah, and the oak of the morning of Deborah. And Rebekah went and returned to her house to his father Isaac, and Jacob sent by her hand rams and sheep and he goats, that he should prepare a meal for his father, such as he desired. And he went after his mother till he came to the land of Cabratan, and he dwelt there. And Rachel bare a son in the night, and called his name Son of My Sorrow, for she suffered in giving him birth. But his father called his name Benjamin, on the 11th of the 8th month, and on the 1st of the 6th week of this Jubilee. And Rachel died there, and she was buried in the land of Ephrath, the same is Bethlehem. And Jacob built a pillar on the grave of Rachel on the road above her grave.
So what about this first part up here? Addition, this day was added. Let's see, there should be some little notes over here. It says the Hebrew name is Asarta, from the root meaning detain. Hence, perhaps we may amend here, keeping back, for on that day he was kept back. Interesting. What about this part down here that references the year? Did y'all have any thoughts on that?
Is that in 29?
Mm-hmm. Says and its name was called Addition, because that it was recorded amongst the days of the feast days, according to the number of the days of the year. What is that saying? According to the number of the days of the year.
Well, I get a initial thought of, anytime we see something where it gives us a kind of clear cut, not a lot of room for amendments or adjustments. That's the way that I read it. It says there is a number of days in a year. We don't get to determine that or change or adjust it. That was my initial reaction was, oh, this is interesting. It's giving us what's going on during the feast day, but this was added in as a part of the feast schedule. So we have the feast year, the beginning and end of the feast days, but then we also have there is a number of days in a year. So I kind of got both of those out of that.
Kyle,
Well,
it does have a little side note there. We could read that.
That's actually what I was just about to do.
Okay.
So 29 has got a lot of those little crosses in there that notes that there's questionable information in there according to what they were able to make out in the ancient documents there. So it says the notes on the side says 29 is very corrupt. Charles suggests that it should be read, and its name was called a keeping back, i.e. Asareth, when it was recorded amongst the days of the feast days in the number of the days of the year. So
that makes more sense.
It does make more sense.
Right. Because then it alleviates any kind of issues like, oh, you're actually adding days or you're changing the way the calendar works or the way the sun works. You're like, no. It's inside of the normal year.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah,
I agree with
we're
that.
not adding days. Yeah, I like it. Okay, well, this seems as if what's being referenced here is we had the 7-day feast of Sukkot, and this day is being added as the 8th great day. That's kind of what I'm seeing here, and that's all there is to this.
Yeah, for the 22nd day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all.
I think the way it's written, it can be a little bit confusing here because you got another story coming right into this where Rachel passed, or I'm sorry, what was it? Deborah passes away on the 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's there's two stories going on here. One is, hey, there's an 8th great day, the 7th day, which is on our calendar, our current Zadok priestly calendar, that we have the 8th great day.
Mm-hmm.
And then, by the way, this took place. So anyway, I think it can be a little bit confusing there, but I think, looking at it, I agree with you guys that it's the 22nd is the 8th great day, and then we have another story taking place here.
Right.
All right. Well, what about over here in 33? I'm kind of switching it up a little bit here. In 33, it says, "And Rachel bare a son in the night, and called his name Son of My Sorrow, for she suffered in giving him birth. But his father called his name Benjamin on the 11th of the 8th month." So, does he have two names, or is this dad saying, "No, I got the name, it's going to be Benjamin"?
Yeah.
Y'all have any insight to Son of My Sorrow, and what are y'all's thoughts on that?
I definitely think that the mother's passed away. And I think Jacob just steps in and goes, no, we're not going to call him, Son of My Sorrow. We're going to call him Benjamin.
Yeah, especially because the names mean so much, and that was, literally built into your character almost. And maybe it isn't that case anymore. Our names are getting further and further away from having like a meaning to them, and they're just what they call you by. But especially at this time, your name was very significant on your life and the pattern that you generally grew up in under. And so, you could see Jacob saying, I think I'm gonna step in here. And again, that's part of him seeing a little bit too. I'm sure he's like, hey, this is gonna be one of the good sons, so let's not go out here and be crazy about this. Now, we do know Benjamin, like the other,
Good-ish.
like the other 12s, they have their moments, good and bad, more bad moments than good sometimes. But he's able to see a little bit, and I think he just kind of knows like this is what he's supposed to be called, almost like with Zachariah and Elizabeth, how they're like, well, what should he name him? And she's like, he's like writing it down on the piece of paper because he can't talk. And he's like, his name's John. I don't know what else we're talking about. Calling this kid John. That's what it is. You can tell me whatever you want, but this is how it's gonna go. So it almost seems like there could be just some of that, a little disagreement. And she was in her feelings at the moment. She was literally dying. So she's like, this kid literally killed me. Call him kid who killed me. And you're like, no, let's not do that. That's probably not the you're in a moment of not good. So if you were thinking clearly, you wouldn't pick this name.
Well, Rachel, again, she is a fantastic mother, a woman of God, no question about it whatsoever. I think some of that sorrow is like I will not ever get to hold you again or see you again. I will never get to be the mom to you that I've been, to your brothers and all these things. I think that sorrow part was just that she was sorry. I'm not going to be here for you. When we look up that name, Benjamin, I just looked at a quick little search on that. It says Benjamin is a popular name given for males derived from Hebrew, says, or Benjamin, translating as son of the right hand. In both Hebrew and Arabic languages, although the Samaritan Pentateuch, the name appears as Benjamin, son of my days. So both of them are, it's a better name, like you said, Josh, a better name to go forth with. Hey, what's your name? Son of Sorrows. But hey, son of the right hand, or also with, like I said, the Pentateuch, it says son of my days.
Yeah, a lot better than the guy who has the dark cloud over his head everywhere he goes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, and what's crazy is like it says that this was the 11th of the 8th month, so this is like 2.5 weeks later. So Deborah's dead. I know, one day after Sukkot, or in that same time period, and then 2.5 weeks later, Benjamin's born. So this is all like really back to back. So this is Jacob gets to see this awesome vision. He gets to see all about his future and all this cool stuff. Then he gets to have a feast day. He's like, oh man, things are looking up. And then all of a sudden it's like back to back. What's going on? It's like one of his first tests almost. And I'm not saying God kills people just because he wants to test us, but when bad things happen in our lives, do you then deviate from that plan? You just saw the whole story. Are you immediately going to take that information and go, yep, you got rid of my favorite wife. I'm out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. God, you're awesome and all, and thanks for Sukkot and this temple and the ladder and whatever. But hey, I just had my kid and you just took my wife. Like, this is ridiculous. I'm done. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you guys this: do you think, like in the past, when we read the Torah portions, we think of Rachel hid her father's idols or his gods underneath her saddle, and then when Jacob makes it, if anyone has, based on paraphrasing, but hey, man, we don't have your stuff, we don't have your idols. But if anyone does, basically put a curse on whoever it is, do we really think that she was cursed from this? This is why she dies in childbirth, because there's a lot of time that goes on between here and there. It wasn't like she immediately died, or that right around the corner she died a year later or 6 months later. When we're reading this, there's some time that's gone by since that whole incident happened with Dad. And, or this is something. Hey, this just happens. Within childbirth, things do happen, and it was her time to go. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I'd say there's a little bit of both because, like same thing with Adam and Eve, like, oh, you surely won't die. Well, yeah, they didn't die right then. It took them another 900 years or whatever to die. So
Right.
it still could be a result of a curse. It could still be a result of a bad action.
Right.
And it has some time, but it also could have just been, like you said, some stuff happens. So
Well,
I don't want to discount either, but I don't want to say it has to be this.
Right. So what I'm saying is Deborah's younger.
Mhm.
Deborah's younger out of the group. She's part, her and her twin sister were the handmaids, right? So she's actually probably the youngest, or her and her sisters are the youngest out of the 4 wives, and she passes away. And then and then Rachel passes away right after that. So I'm just wondering, I mean, we don't know about any curses or anything that was spoken over Deborah. She just passed away. So anyway, it just gives me a different perspective when we're reading Jubilees and we see more of the story play out and more a time that goes by and everything that's developing from the time he's in, over there with Laban and all that stuff and comes back home and everything's taking place. So I guess it still could be part of that, but at the same time, it just makes me wonder if this is just part of the plan. And then this is why when we go back to what Jacob saw and the promise that was given, he says, you will die in peace. You will be at peace with yourself and with everything. And all of a sudden, right after he sees his vision, Deborah's gone. My wife I love very much is gone. And, and then and little does he know what's going to happen to Joseph down the road and all that stuff that's going to, all that's going to take place. So he's getting ready to hit some little bit of turmoil in his life here quickly. But God's like, hey, by the way, it's all going to end well. Don't worry about it.
I don't know. And would that curse? I mean, like Jonathan said, I can kind of see it, either way there. But also, was that curse that was spoken of? Was that a curse because they're assuming that someone potentially took it for the sake of worship, and therefore there will be a curse on you if you took it for the sake of worship? Or was this actually just if you took it, even if you're just trying to destroy it, a curse be on you? Because if we remember correctly, it was one of those things where she definitely wanted to get rid of it. She wanted to destroy it, right?
Yeah.
Or destroy them. So I don't know. I guess there's a couple of different avenues we could go up with that, but all speculation, I guess.
Yeah.
Good speculation on some of that though. So.
Oh yeah.
Any ideas where this pillar is? Anybody have any historical reference to that?
No, I thought it was interesting that it was in Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm.
That's a connection that was like not needed, but seems very purposefully put in there. We think, oh, Bethlehem existed only when Yeshua was born, and maybe it was a little small town before then. You're like, no, they already knew what it was and where it was all the way back in Jacob's time. So it's pretty much giving us a real strong wink indicator toward the future. Especially when Jacob just saw the future. He's like, hey, there's going to be a Messiah. He might come from Bethlehem. Hey, your wife just died here. Maybe you should make it a little bit more important. Somebody someday will recognize what this is. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Well, somebody seems to think they know which one is hers. So there is claims that they know that this place right here that I'm showing is supposedly her tomb. Interesting.
I wonder how many claims of such are out there. But there's only one Bethlehem, so it's over there somewhere.
Well, somebody definitely believes this to be the place. Interesting. Lots of cool pictures. Okay, I digress.
Yeah, I was doing a quick look on line about just some different commentary on why she was buried where she was and not, wasn't in the same place that Jacob would be at. But you're gonna get some rabbinic commentary on that one. One just real quick says the rabbis found fault with Rachel and maintained that because Rachel made light of her right to lie with the righteous Jacob, which she sold for the mandrakes. So they're saying that might have been the reason, but I don't kind of not going with that one myself. But then another one I'm not going with either is it says Rachel to the cave of Machpelah proposes Ramban or Rambon was so that he should not bury two sisters there, for he would be embarrassed before his ancestors. I'm not flying with that one either.
Well, it's
Sorry.
sounds like scriptural Yahtzee almost. Just throw
Yeah.
something in there.
Like, well, we got to come up with some reason why she wasn't. So I guess they're doing what we're doing right now. We're speculating.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but it says, where is the stone monument over Rachel's grave? Of course, it says Bethlehem. It says, in Bethlehem, a city south of Jerusalem, you may find Rachel's tomb. For many years, it stood by a lonesome crossroads, and Rachel's descendants would come here to express their love to her, the mother who lives in a solitary cemetery by a road to be there for her suffering children. I don't know. So apparently, and over there in the land, they have a place they call Rachel's tomb to this day.
Yeah, they do.
And I just read about Hebron. It says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with their wives, Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah, were buried in the cave. So
okay,
it sounds
that's right.
Yeah, so that's what I said. I think I remember once he bought it, that was like the spot. So I think what we're seeing here is a little bit of they're out at Sukkot. Maybe they're they haven't established home yet. Remember, Esau's like, oh, you guys are still in tents, and I have houses, so they're not even established anywhere yet to have like the family burial plot. And on top of that, they're at Sukkot, so maybe they've sojourned some away from wherever their original location was. So it may have been, hey, you kind of died on the way. We stayed around a little extra because you were super pregnant. So, and we're not going to just carry around a dead body. We have to bury you somewhere. So I wonder if it was just even out of necessity. That's just where they were and where they were, what their situation entitled or entailed. Maybe that was a better word.
I just find it really odd, these images that we see here. I mean, this is a pretty significant size structure that's built here, but I'm not seeing my understanding of what a pillar is. This is a building.
Do you mind sharing with us?
Well, I mean, it's the same pictures that I had up a second ago. I mean, it's that
okay.
This is what they're calling Rachel's tomb here.
Well, don't they build the building on top of the quote unquote artifact or monument? Like they do that with all over Israel right now. They put a Catholic church or a mosque or something on top of wherever they perceive to be a burial plot. The Vatican's supposedly has Peter's bones in it. So they build the building on top of the thing and then worship it, unfortunately, I think.
Supposedly this is what's inside this location. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that.
Well, it's real because it's here written down, and if we don't see it today, then that's fine because it was there at one time.
It was there at one time for sure.
Yeah, and the amount of corruption and wars and stuff that's gone on over time, who knows what's there, and somebody just trying to capitalize and may have a marketing scheme of, look, I have the oil that was given to so and so. You're like, no, you don't. Come on, let's be real.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. I'm really curious about her burial location and why she was not buried with him, where we have Leah that was buried with him.
So, guys, I have a line of thought here with why Rachel is not buried with Jacob. And when we look at it, there's 4 wives total, and we're only told, Jonathan, you've backed this up for us, that hey, Leah is buried with Jacob. So it doesn't say anything about the other 2 wives that he has, right? So here in the story, what I think's happening is this is the properness of Leah being the oldest, the first that he married. I'm assuming this is a family, or I don't know if it's a biblical thing. I'm assuming it's a biblical thing that Leah would be buried with Jacob, but none of the other wives would be at all. So I don't think this is because of a curse. I don't think this is because she did something wrong. I don't think it's because all of a sudden Jacob fell out of love with her or any of these things. I think when we read this, there's so much speculation on was she cursed for real? Is this why she died during childbirth and all these different things and possibilities? But one thing we do know that Jacob is only buried with one of his wives, and that's it. So, in just summarizing that up, I think that her buried along the way, she is buried in Bethlehem, which is not a bad place to be buried, by the way.
Good dirt there.
Yeah, it's good dirt in Bethlehem. So it's not to me when she's buried, it's not like this is a just put her somewhere over there, whatever.
Right.
I think this is very intentional and purposeful that she is buried where she is buried. And there is, we looked it up, guys, that there is a place in Bethlehem that says this is the burial site or the tomb of Rachel. Now, whether that is or not, for sure, or if it's just one of those things that makes money, I don't know. But according to Google, there's a place over there that you can go visit that says this is Rachel's tomb. So
yeah. All right. Any other speculations? Leave it down in the comments, guys. We'd like to know what you got to say about that.
Of course. Yeah, and Joe, to your point, I know you said Leah was for sure buried there with Jacob, and I think we do have that confirmed pretty for sure. I think that the other two wives were Zilpah and Bilhah. I believe one is confirmed to be also buried with Jacob, and the other one possibly or more than likely. So he may have been buried with more than one, and it may have been all of them other than Rachel. And again, kind of to the point I had made earlier, I really think that all the ideas and speculations that we're throwing out, it may have just been as simple as that's where they were. It was a very sudden moment. She was not expected to die. They didn't have anything ready, prepared. They were on the way somewhere. This is a very sad day, and you have a new child. So you're trying to travel with a new child and bring the body back to a certain place. I think it may have just been out of necessity, this is what we're doing. And that doesn't, then that, like you said, Joe, that doesn't stain the story at all. That's hey, if you die on the battlefield, I don't always have to take you back to your, home in Tennessee. You died here. We were still going to fight. We buried you and we honored you the best that we could. And he put up the memorial for her. And, we found out later that Bethlehem's important, but at the time to him, it was just a place where she got buried. And there's no mention of anything bad or evil or negative or anything like that. So I don't think we really have to worry about that too much. It may have been a part of the story, but it very well could have just been, they were there. That's where she got buried because she died suddenly, and they weren't prepared for any of that kind of stuff. It wasn't like, oh, in my old age, I stretched out my legs like we we're reading earlier. This was, I was having a kid, and then I just didn't make it.
I got one more thing.
All right.
So what if when Moses took the bones of Joseph with him to be buried with his fathers, would that path have been crossed? Could they have been collected? Could the bones have been collected?
You're in plausible land.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Something interesting to consider. So with that, guys, let us know what you think down in the comments, and we will see you next time for chapter 33 in the book of Jubilees. God bless.
Shalom.